Learning to cope with a spinal cord injury, either your own or that of a loved one, is something everyone affected by a spinal cord injury will go through. But what is coping? What do you actually do? Can you improve how you cope? And how can you help someone else cope? Let's first think about some of the mental and emotional challenges that someone with a spinal cord injury may have to cope with. When any of us are faced with an overwhelming life event, such as a serious injury or a major trauma, we are forced to cope with both the practical problems, such as getting fed, emptying our bladder and bowels, obtaining money, getting from A to B, and so on, and the great surges in our emotions, panic, anger, hopelessness that accompany it. All of us cope with these stresses in different ways. Think of it like a toolkit of coping strategies. We all have one of these, built up over time, including tips we have learned from our parents and friends, and other things we have discovered ourselves. After a spinal cord injury, some of these strategies will no longer be possible. For example, going for a run as a way of dealing with frustration. At the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre, our psychologists and psychiatrists work together with you to help you to replace some of the strategies that you can no longer use and learn new ones. We use 5 key tools to help someone cope. These are information, time, support, role models, and keeping hope alive. These apply to relatives and friends as well as a person with a spinal cord injury. First is information. When you have a spinal cord injury, it is normal to think, what's happened to me? Will I walk again? Will I work again? And be full of questions. The way you understand your injury depends on a lot of factors. The person you are, the background you come from, as well as the precise nature of your illness or injury. You use all this to appraise your situation. If you have a very sketchy understanding, or if your prognosis is uncertain, it will be very difficult to know how to cope with it, or you may choose an ineffective coping strategy. Once there is a reasonable understanding of your injury, the mental list of tasks to be coped with will follow, sometimes in a terrifying rush. Some of these tasks will be practical, some emotional. You may not know how you will cope with your injury. This is entirely appropriate. Why would we know how to cope with something most of us would never have considered in our lives? At this stage, it helps to use what we call a goal-setting approach to break down the uncertain future into a period of manageable activities. Think of it as a bit like trying to drive in a dense fog. If you can't see anything in front of your car, you'll be terrified to move. But when you can see perhaps 100 yards, you can drive. The next tool you need is time. Time to grieve as well as time to learn. You may need time to come to terms with a changed body. You may feel pressured to move on with your rehabilitation, and yet moving on too fast might seem like giving up on your former self and on what you loved about your old life. The third tool is support. This can come from many sources. It does not always have to come from mental health professionals or even health professionals at all. Many people prefer to use the support of family, friends, and other people learning to cope with spinal cord injury. Each of these can provide different types of support, and you need to keep control and decide what support works best for you. Number 4 are role models. These are needed and available thanks to spinal injury charities. Patients often tell me they clearly remember meeting their charity support worker and how valuable they found this. Newly injured people and their relatives need to see that disabled people can be healthy, attractive, and productive to feel hopeful for their future. At the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre, we run coping groups with a person with lived experience who can talk about what it is like living in the community, trying out new activities, as well as simply living with the challenges day to day of a spinal cord injury. Last but not least is keeping hope alive. Though it might feel hard at times, it is important to keep hope alive. In my job, I encourage people and their family to be open about their feelings if they're struggling to hold on to hope, or sometimes even having thoughts of not wanting to be alive anymore. Despite what you might think, actually talking about these difficult thoughts helps a lot and makes self-harm less likely. So don't be afraid to talk about this with someone you trust. At the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre, we try to give good experiences throughout rehabilitation. I hope that I have given you some new ideas about coping. While the examples are from spinal cord injury rehabilitation, we all share the same feelings in times of loss and stress, and we can all learn from each other new methods of coping. So may your toolkit be large, varied, and well worn.